So please welcome Rebecca Dawson to the show. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, Ashley. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, you are, you're happy to be here. I am so happy for you to be here because the rabbit hole that I went down, once I found you, I have shared you with so many people. And it's like listening to you and knowing where we're at in this world and who I've interviewed in the past, you kind of put it all together, but in this simple way, right? So this morning I was walking the dogs and I'm listening to uh the mirror and I can still see this 4D, 3D. But you give these references that I can actually understand it better. So it's been very like head emoji exploding experience the last few days of immersing myself in you. But I want to share with people on a like just kind of where you started when you were young and you were remembering Egypt and you were having all these memories come back to you. But like it was almost like you were lit up so early in life. Like you came into the on this planet ready and aware of all the things. Like you remembered your past lives and you're on this trajectory to come to when you turned 18. I mean, you have so many benchmarks, but will you kind of take us on those little path so then we can start really going deep?
Sure. It's always helpful to have a bit of a backstory, isn't
Yes.
it?
Like, or I would just go right in, but I think people need to understand when you uncovered your magic.
Sure. Oh, well, I think I'm still uncovering my magic, actually, as we all are. And that's what this
Yes.
whole evolution of consciousness is. I mean, that would be really what I would call the main reason we're all here at this time is to actually rediscover the truth of who and what we are. So for me, I mean, I grew up in both my parents were school teachers, and I grew up traveling around the countryside in Western Australia, which at that time in the 70s was, there wasn't a lot going on there. Um, so just a regular kind of Australian family, originally Catholic, and went through some Catholic schools. But all that time, I had a really great awareness, or for me it was just normal, my way of seeing and feeling and being, where I could see energy fields around people and people who had passed away. um, I had a lot of memory, or not at that age, I didn't realize it was memory, but awareness of Egypt and Atlantis and various experiences. I had an awareness of myself being more male and being a lot older. So it was an interesting experience being a young female child. I found that interesting, and I never really fit in with anybody else. I think socially, school was a little bit of a challenge for me because I used to see and feel differently about things. I excelled in everything. And I think that was my way of trying to find a place where I would fit somewhere within society.
Did you share
Um,
that with your parents? Were you telling your mom things like that?
yes. And she was great, actually. So by the time I was about 7, she would play games with me at home, like, can you guess what number is behind this card? And we would have games to kind of develop telepathy. And I think she was equally as excited for herself because it was a game that we used to play between ourselves. So she was aware that I had those capacities. Some things became a little bit disruptive. I used to have a lot of experiences at night, in the middle of the night, with different, I would say, entities visiting,
Mm.
waking up outside of the house sometimes in the middle of the night and then needing to get back in. Um, Lots of
Oh,
different
wow.
things like that that happened. That was actually really quite unsettling. Um, and I think my family didn't really have the context to be able to explain any of those things to me. So a lot of it was written off as, oh, it was probably just a bad dream and you were sleepwalking, or, you know, it's probably not what you think, that kind
Right.
of thing.
Right.
But I am very grateful because I also, my mother actually put me into meditation classes quite early, about the age of 9,
Oh,
through an
wow.
organization that was the Theosophical Society back then, because that's really the only place you could access that kind of thing in Australia at that time. So I was very grateful for that, because at least I developed some kind of framework for understanding for what was happening for me.
Hmm. And she was
Yes.
doing that for you to help you, like, because she knew that would
Yes.
help you. Wow.
Yes. Which was amazing. And then she was great in that she didn't then insist that I go to church. And even though I was at a Catholic school, she didn't insist that I
Huh.
participate in everything, um, which again made it a little bit more challenging on the social front
Right. Yeah, I'm
as far
sure.
as belonging.
Right.
But it enabled me to then spend my lunchtimes in the library, looking at mysteries of the
Hmm.
planet Earth kind of books, which back then, early 80s, I guess, was, things like investigating paranormal phenomena or things like
Right.
that. Just things that started to make a bit more sense to me. Yeah.
Huh. Wow. Okay, so now let's move on to when you were 16 and 18, right?
Yes. So around 16, I started to have experiences at night where I would get three beings in white, hooded cloaks by the side of my bed. And they were with me for a period of about 4 months every night. And nothing was ever said.
Hmm.
Nothing was ever really clear to me, but they would just stand beside the bed and my body would start moving. And my arms would start moving around a certain way, almost like a moving meditation. And it would go on for about 20 minutes, half an hour, I guess. And then it would stop.
And they would
And that went,
disappear.
and then they would disappear.
Huh.
But it felt like I knew them and that they were preparing me for something. And then around the age of 18, I was interested in more in the Egyptian symbology again. So I bought a set of ancient Egyptian tarot cards and I was just playing around with them. And during doing a reading with somebody, suddenly that's when my first channeling experience happened, which I never planned to do. I don't think anyone ever plans, or maybe
Right.
they do. I never thought of it to be a channeler. I
Yes.
mean, I was at university at the time and I was studying architecture. I wanted to be an architect. And and suddenly my voice changed and my face changed, and it seemed like a few minutes and an hour went by, and it was an extraordinary experience all round. What I
Hmm.
realized is at that time, in that first instance of that channeling experience, my arms were moving and my body was moving in the same way that it moved when those three beings were by the
Oh,
side of my bed.
huh. Have you
So
ever
it's all,
reconnected with those three beings?
yes. I believe that they are the masters that I now channel.
Okay, got it.
Yes. So all kind of unintentional and unplanned. The difficulty was not getting into the channeling state. The difficulty was then spending some years after that figuring out, what does this mean for my life? Because it was very disruptive.
Hmm.
It blew all my senses open even more. So I did go through a period of time where I didn't have the discernment or the experience or the control, so to speak, to decide when it would happen and when it wouldn't happen,
Hmm.
or how it would happen. And there was a small period of time there where I was really just an open line. So, anything could really come through.
Like you could be at the grocery store and like start channeling.
That would happen.
Oh, wow.
Or, at that age, 18, 19, 20, you're going out to the pub with friends and listening to music and someone brushes past you and all of a sudden there's a message for them.
Mm. And would you
You
tell
know,
them?
yes, because, having a couple of alcoholic beverages will
Open
loosen
the
the tongue and you're not so worried about how it's going to sound. Of course, I learned from that very early not to do that because it's, you want to be fully present and you want to fully have that person engage with you and actually want that
right.
guidance. So that
And
was
then
me as
dating,
a young
like would
girl being out of
yeah.
control a little bit.
But like when you would start dating, like would that happen with a boyfriend?
No, I was very fortunate because I've been pretty careful about who I've engaged with over the course of my life, and I have only actually really had partners who have who I've met through spiritual communities.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, that would
I've
be,
never, yes, that's been very important to me.
oh my gosh. Okay, so you forget architect. You're not going to be an architect. Now I'm going to be a channel. Is there a fine line there, or did you realize that it's just not going to be architecture?
No, I mean, that actually wasn't something that I consciously chose at that time. When the channeling started, my brain started to work differently. I used to get a lot of migraines, and I realized that everything in the chemistry in my brain was changing, and how it was working was changing, and even where I was consciously operating from in my mind was changing. So it was like learning to drive a car in a different way. You have to get into one gear and then get out of it and get into another gear to then be able to function normally.
Right.
So unfortunately, I found from beginning to do quite well, my brain just wouldn't analyze and have sequential thought the same way that it used to. And you have to be quite mathematically and spatially organized to do something like architecture, because
Right.
there's building science in there, and there's spatial
Oh, yeah.
geometry and measurements, and my brain just couldn't do it. And it's because when I was in channel, I was operating in such a macroscopic way, being able to see multidimensional patterns, be able to see someone's entire blueprint through all their different lives and where they are simultaneously all at once. So it was such an expansive view that it took me a number of years to be able to learn how to shift from that back into linear process thinking, which I can do now quite
Right.
easily. But at that time, I just couldn't do it. So I actually left university and went traveling to try and find a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought there'll be some in Europe and England, and I didn't find any. US wasn't an option for me then. And then I had no success there. So I came back to Australia, went back to university, and started again. And after many years and different experiences, trying to do things normally and have a family and do all the things that you do, nothing was ever really satisfying or stimulating to me like the wisdom and consciousness that I was able to experience with
Oh,
channeling.
I bet.
So yeah.
What's coming to my mind, because I've listened to how you describe the earth shift and how we're moving into this 5D. And, if I've interviewed 20 people, we probably talk about it, right? Like if I put the last 20 episodes, we've been talking about this, and it's so cool now because there's so many similarities. There's so many, like, whatever he said, you say it. And I'm like, okay, that everyone's getting the same information. It's like, it's not, people will say, how do you
Right.
interview someone one day and then go to the next one the next day? I said, I can see before it might have been a little bit, someone's down this path and thinking this way, but all of a sudden in the last like few months, it's very similar. Like it's amazing.
Yes, and thank you for expressing that. It's wonderful. I've been noticing the same thing,
Huh.
particularly because when we started talking about the shift to 5D back in 2009, I think it was. And it wasn't a thing. I mean, even when that content first started coming through, and that was within a small group in my living room, which is
Oh,
how I used
wow.
to for many years. And that actually, all that content became our first book. But it just wasn't a concept. And I remember thinking at the time, this is actually a leap in my own understanding, because the content that's starting to come through now, I have absolutely no reference point for.
Hmm.
So that was a big evolution in my own channeling. And so to be talking about that shift in consciousness and shift in dimensional reality for so many years, and then suddenly it's everywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that happened about 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now suddenly people are really beginning to see it in a similar way. And
Yes.
to me, it's extraordinary. And I'm so happy about it, because it shows me that humanity's consciousness is accelerating far quicker than I thought that it would within this particular life experience.
Mm-hmm.
It was my vision and understanding that the content that we brought through would be relevant in around 20 years' time for people. So my awareness was always, I'm just going to create as much content as I possibly can, and we'll put it there, and people will eventually find it and everything will make sense to them. And yet the consciousness is accelerating so quickly now that that's actually catching up
Right.
to what we've created, which for me is extraordinary, and I didn't expect to see it in this lifetime. To such an extent that I'm now putting up content. I've just started to release content that of events and seminars that I've done from 2016, 2017, and so on. And I have people contacting me. I've just put another one up in the last week saying, I am so glad I have seen this. I know why you didn't put this up till this week.
Oh, wow.
Because if you put this up before, we wouldn't have been able to understand what you were
Right.
talking.
Right. You know,
So
it's
it's
funny
amazing.
because yes, when I go back to look at to do my deep dive on who I'm interviewing, I usually don't go back to 2017 because I think, oh, that's old. You know, like, oh, we're not up to speed. They're not up to speed yet to where we are now at 2024. But it's so funny because I was when I was doing years, you exactly like I was listening to one, I think it was 2017. You know, we had no, it was like, oh my gosh, this is new. Like this is like where
Right.
or maybe I'm hearing it with different ears now because I'm ready to hear it. But it's just so it's the fascination of where I look at it like, AI is just like that. Like the technology with my daughter who's 18, you have a son that's 19. We didn't have cell phones when they were born, right? And then, well, we had the flip
Right.
phones, but we didn't have the pictures for the hospital. And she'd always say, "Why don't I have any pictures when I was born?" Like, well, we have
Right.
pictures, regular ones, but not because but think of
They're on
that.
film.
Yeah, they're on film. But think of that time, 18, 19 years of time, so fast. Like the
Oh,
technology, and now it's just it's going faster and faster. Explain that, like, because you explain how time in the 3D, and I was just watching the way you drew it, like within these lines here is a 3D, and then the 4D is the membrane and the
mm-hmm.
mirror, right? The mirror is inside
Yes.
the 3D, and then the
Yes.
5D, but it's an expansion on the below and the above. So it's
Right.
when the speed when you say like vibration, time, and are all the same thing, energy, it's all the same. So explain how that works and why it is. Why do you feel like it is speeding up so fast?
What a great question. I love the way you just framed that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So if we look at how we traditionally view reality in third dimensional reality is we see everything in a linear progression.
Right.
So we have a past and we have a future, and that would be like an x-axis, if you will. And then you have the y-axis, which is the vertical line, and that's the now moment, that's the zero.
Mhm.
So a lot of what we try to do in our spiritual practices, of course, is move into that now moment through meditation or deep presence. And in that, it enables us to actually begin to move beyond the limitation of just a third dimensional experience of life and of ourselves. So when we have a shift in vibration, it doesn't actually move us from one end of that x-axis timeline to the other. And equally, it doesn't really move us from negative experiences to positive experiences or from darkness to light. And this is something that's so important because so many humans will say, well, I want to ascend and I want to become more conscious because I want to move from this end of the spectrum of awareness to the other. Rather, we start to increase our vibrational capacity to experience life, which means that if you have that linear line there, as we expand, we have the ability to encompass a larger spectrum of vibration. And with a larger spectrum of vibration are multiple versions of reality, multiple timelines, multiple opportunities, more pathways and possibilities. So when that happens, it happens because we're moving more into the present moment. We can now access a different version and a different version and a different version. More often than not, as we're becoming more expanded in that way, we don't experience time in the same way because we're not locked into that one. This is my pathway in life. This is my timeline. Now it's offshoots everywhere, fractals everywhere. Now we have opportunities to experience this version or this version or this version. So we often have a sense of timelessness with things, or our experience of time is speeding up because now more possibilities seem to happen, more events seem to happen in an apparent shorter period of time. Because we're now moving up and down through different versions of reality, not just the long
Yes.
one.
Yes.
So, in that, our capacity as conscious beings is we can actually now begin to experience more versions of life. And sometimes we will experience more possibilities simultaneously. We start to have simultaneous things happen. So, instead of incremental, slow, unfolding change, we have huge bursts of this, and this all changed this week.
Yes.
And that's what's happening for us as a collective consciousness. And this is what's so exciting and why so many beings from all over the universe and different dimensional realities are gathering, because it's a bursting force of possibility. And we're seeing that with our capacity to view things differently.
Right. So when you talk about the 3D that we've, as a human have been in, and everything's a mirror, like everything is a completion of start to complete, or and when you move on to the fifth dimension. So what I found, where I was resonating with you and resonance, was my life now is, I'm not affected by, I don't watch the news. I don't even know what's going on. And I live in this high place, but now that I understand it from the way you taught me was, you know, I, it's not about completing, it's about creating. Like, how many things can I create
Yes.
now, right? Like in that
Yes.
dimension. And when you expand in that, to that capacity, it's not about it's like start to finish. It's like, I need to do this. And then as soon as it's complete, then I'll go to the next thing. I'm
Right.
creating, right?
Yes. And that's a big distinction between a third dimensional reality where we're moving along a particular timeline, everything's sequential. We have to finish this step before we can get to the next one. So it's a very, well, in our view, a laborious way of creating.
Right.
So, but it's the condition of the third dimensional reality. It's just the way that it is.
Right.
And we're here in this reality to actually watch things unfold. It's what the masters would call reverse engineering. That the Earth reality, as we have known it, is an experience of reverse engineering, because everything is actually already created and we're watching it in slow motion. How was this actually put together?
Yeah, I love that.
Which
Gosh,
is which is
you explain it
fascinating.
so good. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Does this actually work? So you
Yes.
pull everything apart and we look at it so we can
Right.
understand it. And that has been our human experience. Now that our consciousness is evolving, it's now back into creation. So rather than having to pull something apart in slow motion, now we start to ignite things. So now it's not about repetition towards perfection, which has been the karmic cycle and that third, fourth density loop. Now it's how much can we ignite and how many different directions.
Right. Okay. On that note, so multidimensionality, different aspects of myself experiencing when you're doing this, like I'm over here doing this, I'm over here doing this, I'm over here doing this, right? Explain that.
Yes. So the challenge of that for the human who has been sitting in third, fourth density for so long is that we tend to think, well, we're starting things, but we're not finishing it. I'm interested in this, I'm now here, I'm now there. And if you look at the younger generations and what's currently being known as ADHD and those sorts of things, you can see that that's multidimensional operation,
Mhm.
because I'm here and I'm here and I'm here and I'm here and here. Because what we're doing is we're igniting new pathways and possibilities. We don't have to be, an individual human in fifth dimensional reality doesn't have to be the one to ignite something and then see it through to the finish,
Right.
because that's the reverse engineering
Mm-hmm.
of third dimensional reality. This is about seeding of consciousness. And when you're aware that you're sitting in a collective consciousness, that we're all branches off the same tree, whatever you ignite and what you're interested in beginning, it then becomes available for everyone. And this is what unified consciousness is. So I had an idea and I started it, but it didn't seem to really go anywhere. It's not that it hasn't gone anywhere, it's that you've started it and someone else is very likely to come along and pick it up. And this is where we start doing things in joy for the greater good or for collective humanity, because now we're working together as a whole.
Right.
Rather than I am successful and I have been effective in life if I start something and I am the one to actually see it through to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So the more joyful and spontaneous we are, the more we are seeding new multi-directional, multi-dimensional pathways and blueprints for experience for the new collective reality.
Like imagination, right? I could sit here all day and just imagine all these amazing ideas, and I'm putting it
Yes,
out there.
yes, but even more effective than that is to actually express them. And there's something very powerful in that. And it's not just expressing it as in putting it in a notebook, but actually to put sound to it, because sound is so powerful for creation. It's very important. In the beginning, there was word. And if you look to all the traditional cultures in our Earth history, sound was how things were actually brought into materialization. So to have an idea or have a concept, or I'm really interested in this, express it. Even if you're just expressing it to yourself in the room, put sound to it.
Like
Because
talk,
that's, yes,
speak it into existence.
yes. Because a language is so powerful. And what we have learned in our reverse engineering reality is I have an idea, but don't share it with anyone until it's really crystallized.
Right.
And what we're saying is express it so that it may become crystallized.
Yes. You know, whenever I've created something, I've always been one to share. I always put it out there, especially since, uh, I mean, I can just remember I started a business and I kept saying, I'm going to do this. And the people are like, you what? And I'm like, yeah, watch me. And
Yes.
it's like, and I know, speak it into existence. And people would say, oh, keep it quiet. Everyone's going to say, oh, you're crazy. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
well, I know how to create, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to create. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly that. So it's not being afraid of expressing something and then feeling the responsibility and commitment to see it through. That's important too, because then it becomes it's now my burden.
Yes.
Now it's repetition towards perfection, but
Or where
rather
is
the
it,
joy,
Ashley? Where is it? Like,
yes, the joy and lightness of the expression itself is enough to ignite its creation somewhere in the collective consciousness. And then you may choose to continue to chaperone that into being or not.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's talk about relationships, because that was fascinating to me, and how different relationships, like being a mom and watching my girls with, they're kind of, I always say a couple of friends is great if you can, I always say your vibe attracts your tribe. And, it's always been kind of a little of a struggle because they have me as a mom, and, I'm sure your son the same way. It's just like they've been raised in this higher vibration and knowing. So when you watch these kids that are not in that vibrational of knowing, it's harder for them. I said, well, it's harder for you'll have to go down in vibration. They're not wrong, but they're on their own journey. But it is when you feel like in a relationship, even a marriage, when you're not growing together, but when you realize you're growing and it's about like my growth. I'm not I'm
Right.
not concerned about his growth.
Right. Well, I think that's just a repositioning of reality, because if you are source consciousness expressing, then you are at the center of your reality. And therefore, the most important thing and our what deserves our utmost devotion in this human experience is the devotion to the development of your own consciousness. Because if you're evolving your own consciousness, your reality is evolving with you. And this is a really important point, actually. It just came through a seminar last week, is that we often think that as humans, we adapt to our environment. But
Right.
actually, our environment adapts to us. So we have to evolve, and then the reality that we experience around us will evolve with us. And the same thing goes for relationships. Because if you have someone that you really, is a very powerful presence in your life, they're not more powerful than you are in your life.
Mm.
Doesn't matter how much you love them or how devoted you are to them, this must always come first, because this is the source of the projection of your reality.
Right.
If you were to see yourself at the center of a sphere, your reality is the holographic view that's formed out of that center point. So if the focus is on the expansion of your own consciousness, if you are honoring that, as you do that, the version of your partner or person you're in a relationship with, necessarily now, because they're a part of your reality, they will evolve with you.
Mm-hmm.
You get an upgraded version of them. And I've seen this happen time after time with people. They'll often say, well, what happens if I evolve? And then it means that we're not together anymore because we're not in a similar vibrational field. And if they're clear that that person is just a part of their reality, even if they evolve and the partner doesn't move in the same direction with them or continue to be the same role with them in their reality moving forward, they still evolve within that view. So ultimately, you might see your partner, for example, really start to come into their own,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're not with you. But oftentimes they do evolve with you and they continue to stay in your reality. So this is about upgrading your relationships by focusing on honoring your own consciousness. What does that mean? It means choosing for whatever feels the most expansive for your being, which is a challenging one because a lot of people think that relationships are about sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to sacrifice this to do what's right for them and so on, when really it's about how can I be so devotional to self that my expansion means they get to expand too.
Mm-hmm. So good. Yes. And that's how I feel. And I interviewed this woman about relationships and yesterday, and we were talking about similar to that. And, when you realize that you're like your two pillars, and she talked about the prophet, and there's a poem in that amazing book about, when you don't need to drink from the same cup, it's like, understanding that. But it is what I was getting from you listening to part of a relationship class that you were teaching was where is as I evolve and I do focus on that in our fifth dimensional new earth reality, that is how relationships will be. We'll just be continually because our frequency is so much higher, right?
Right, right. And I liken it to, I think you said two pillars in there, two candles. So how we've learnt to be as candles is we've learnt to lean into each other and share a flame. And usually there's one person in a relationship that might be slightly more vibrationally conscious than the other. That is usually the case.
Right.
And there's an attraction there because when you lean in towards each other and you lend your flame to the other candle can now ignite and become more conscious. But what happens when you do that is that the wax and the candle of the initial one starts to melt far more quickly.
Right.
And I have spoken to many people over the course of 30 years who have come to us and said, I'm really trying to assist my partner, but I feel like I'm not okay. And so what we would say in a more perhaps evolved way of looking at relationship is that if you are a candle and they are a candle, as long as you keep your flame alight, they have an opportunity to light theirs because we're in quantum resonance then.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that happens, you can start to see more clearly. Now there's two flames in the room, there's more light, which means now we can see more doorways and possibilities and pathways for us.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody wins.
Right.
Rather than leaning into each other, where you're both going to melt a little bit more quickly.
Yes, that is a great visual. How we used to, well, I guess maybe last year in my interviews, I used to say, Oh, so we're moving on to this new earth. Where are the people in the old earth going to be?
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
those questions. I'm not there. I've learned and evolved, so I understand. But the way you describe it, and it's about resonance, and I love that word because it's when you resonate, you really use that word a lot. And it's important in the as we evolve and we expand, is that resonance
Yes.
going to become this big thing?
Well, I think resonance is so important because resonance isn't really about connection in the way that we think of it. We're so used to having relationships or connections with people that's an exchange. And it's
Mhm.
what we call an energetic that sits in our understanding of electrical systems. I'm positive, you're negative, we come together, there's a charge. I give you something, you give me something. And even if we try not to be transactional, we still do operate in that way energetically with relationships. But once we move beyond that third, fourth paradigm, it's no longer a transaction, it's no longer exchange. It's now, I have unlimited, infinite consciousness, and I recognize that you do as well. And therefore, you begin to shift with each other through a different kind of attraction. And it's an attraction that's about an agreement. I
Mhm.
have an agreement that you exist, you have an agreement that I exist. And as your vibration shifts, your view of them shifts,
Mhm.
and nothing is donated, nothing is sacrificed. And that's so important because the more we can offer ourselves in devotion to ourselves, the more everybody else has an opportunity to shift in resonance too. And that's a basic fundamental rule within quantum energy, is that if you have two energies sitting in vicinity of each other, the one that is the higher energy, if it maintains its sense of existence, the other one will shift to
Rise
meet
to
it.
it. Yeah. I always say to the girls, be the thermostat in the room, don't be the thermometer.
Right.
Make them
Oh, I
rise to
love
your
that.
energy, right? Like
That's beautiful.
be that person. Um, yeah. So when I was when you're talking right now and I'm thinking of all the information, is this information that you have received from the masters? Nothing that you've read, you don't listen to anything else. This is just all the
No, I
information.
don't listen to anything else. I don't read anything. I think the last thing I read was an Eckhart Tolle book back in when that
Oh my
first came
gosh.
out, Power of Now, which I thought was great.
Oh my gosh.
Years and years ago. I'm
Huh.
very careful because, especially when the new kind of content came through, I was very careful. I didn't want to have a filter in any way to check, is anyone else
Right.
talking about this? Does this make sense? Shall I discount it? I just wanted it to be purely, this is what's coming out. And there are many times where I'm sitting in seminar and channel and I'm like, really? Wow, that's a big claim. That's a bit bold. Is that really true?
Uh-huh.
But so many times it's been proven to be correct that I just go with it now after so many years.
Can we
I
do
don't
some
question
of
it.
that? Can we do a little
Of
channeling?
course. Yes.
And can you explain to people how you come, like how it come, like I know I've listened to you, so explaining how you come into that uh, space.
So I think I mentioned earlier on, it's like learning how to drive a car. I've got to be able to move in and out quite quickly. So it's just a very small shift within my awareness. I just lean back a little bit, and there we go. So my team of masters come through, and my voice changes a little bit, and my mannerisms are different.
And
And while that's happening, my Rebecca version aspect of self is listening in, and I get a beautiful multidimensional display. It's like watching a documentary or a movie
hmm,
of what they're discussing, which quite often is way more than what's expressed. We often will just express one stream of an entire view.
wow. And when you say, because I heard you say that you see it, is it in colors or is it
Yes,
watching a movie?
yes, like that. But it's multidimensional, so there's many layers to it as well. It's something that took my actual brain quite some time to be able to assimilate and make sense of
Hmm.
over the years. So, for example, if I'm doing a personal session for somebody, they may be asking me about a child they're having a challenge with, for example. what is expressed about that child is probably one sphere out of a whole sea of different spheres of all of the potentials and possibilities and lifetimes and awarenesses of that child.
Wow.
And we'll zoom in on that one because that's the one that's most relevant to where they are right now.
And
So
is that shining brightest? Like how do you pick
it just zooms in and then they start speaking about it.
Okay.
And sometimes when I first started doing this some years ago, I used to get a little bit frustrated because I was much more involved. You know, I really wanted to know what was going on. Now I just
let it go,
let it happen. But I would be like, but why are you talking about that when I can see what's going on here? And this is really important. The mother needs to know about this. And, you know, it would always be that this is what they need to do right now.
Oh, funny. Huh. Oh, that's so, you know, like I started automatic writing, I really got into it this year. And when you talk about you tilt back, you know, and when you said that, that helps me. I understand that just through my automatic writing where you know,
Yes.
and then I would do these processes that I interviewed somebody and I would clear and I started to like lay in bed and I could connect. And so I get that. And I feel like it's the practice, it's my meditation, it's my breath work. Every time I'm like, it's not just, you know, people are like, well, when is that going to happen for me? You know, when do I get to start? You know, we all have that ability, right? Like
We do.
Yes.
We do. It's actually just a matter of learning how to drive the car. And because, you know, we're all like hyper sports cars. What do you call them? Supercars. Hypercars? Right. My son needs cars.
I don't know. Supercars.
But we don't know how to use them. We don't know how to push the buttons. So we have this whole capacity that we've never been taught how to use. We've been driving in first and second gear when in fact we can move into fourth and fifth gear. So that's something I talk about sometimes in courses, is helping people to do that. So with what you're talking about with leaning back, when that's happening for you, there's actually a movement from your awareness sitting at the front of your brain to moving into the back of your brain. And so when your awareness is sitting in the back of the brain, that visual cortex is not just there to interpret what you're seeing with your eyes, it's there to interpret what you're experiencing with your consciousness. So I actually physically feel my awareness pull to the back of my brain. And it's very different from when I first started to do readings for people back in the day. I would very much have a lot of pressure towards the front of my head, you know, out of the third eye, particularly if I used to do a lot of medical intuition. So I'd actually be looking into people's organs and looking at their energy fields. And it was all very much this way. So I was looking out using the third eye and the pressure was here. But with channeling, it's the opposite. You actually move to the back and just relax. And it's quite extraordinary.
And allow, like you just are like there and you just let it, and you just trust. You're not questioning.
That is the toughest thing about channeling, in my opinion. The toughest thing is actually letting go and trusting what happens, and having the capacity to just believe what's happening.
As we expand, as you know, we get into the 5th and 6th and 7th, and we start living in this new place. Is that how we're going to be? Is that what the earth looks like?
That's a really great question. I don't know yet. That would be a great question to ask.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask the masters.
Today.
Okay.
I don't know what it's going to look like, but let's see.
Okay, let's go.
All right. Shall we dive in on that question then?
Sure, let's do that.
Greetings, dear blessed one, we are with you. And in the nature of curiosity, you are bringing your questions on this day. If one were to be curious about the possibility for the earth reality, that is very difficult to answer. It is difficult to answer because the human mind will ask for it to be framed in terms of what will actually happen. And if we were to describe this in terms of the mechanics of your experience, we would say it's important to focus on the capacity of the human itself, because depending on the rate of evolution of the human, it will determine the nature of your reality. Yes. Let us speak then about the possibility for new experiences of creation, because you are a creative species, of course. In our view, the greatest challenge you have had within your current dimensional reality has been organization and structure. Because when you organize yourselves in certain ways and participate with particular structures, it's very difficult for you to experience the true nature of yourselves. Your current educational and economic and even migratory experiences and structures do not allow you to make choices based on resonance. They allow you to make choices based on strategy. And certain factors for organizing humanity based on parameters of success that have nothing to do with your vibrational quality nor the expansion of your consciousness. Therefore, you are organizing yourselves into groups and into places and into formations that have nothing to do with the evolution of your consciousness, and therefore do not facilitate the acceleration of it. Yes?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
So what can humanity look like? What can your reality look like? It can look like humans who are consciously choosing, I will be here in this place, or I will be engaging with this activity, or I will be communicating and in resonance with these people because they feel as if they are conducive to the continual expansion of my consciousness. And this is where the new groups and communities based upon resonance begin to emerge within your reality. That is the reorganization of humanity.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
It's like interesting when you look at our bodies and our DNA and what the DNA has been in the third dimension. What does our bodies look like, and how do they function as we expand our consciousness?
Well, of course, as you come out of these organizational theories, yes, you begin to realize that even how you viewed your own bodies and how you nourish and experience your body is also being structured and organized. When you eat, when you sleep, yes, how you move your body and exercise, and all of the motivational factors behind these choices have nothing to do with the evolution of your consciousness. So what this looks like within the human body is that when you begin to make choices for your own sense of vitality based on what feels expansive and invigorating for me, that coincides with the expansion and evolution of the capacities that are available to you at a cellular level and within your original blueprint design, which everything within your biology is actually designed to operate in accordance with a system of resonance. But the choices that you make for your body are based on an organization of convenience. Yes.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Very. So I have children, and I see them going through the education system that doesn't resonate with the new earth and the new dimension that we're moving toward. How is like all these the government education systems? Um, how are they going to transition? Are they going to have to fall apart before they get into this new dimension, new vibration?
Well, in our view, there is no requirement for such cataclysm with this particular transition of consciousness, not how you've experienced it previously in your linear experience of time with the earth reality, where there has been cataclysm and then there has been a new beginning and a new design. The whole premise of this evolution of consciousness is that destruction and then initial creation is not required. This is an experience where you are experiencing yourself in multiple realities. That's an expansion of consciousness, agree? And therefore the old will sit alongside the new until the majority of human consciousness chooses, because it's resonant to them, to move to something new. So in essence, this evolution is hallmarked by more choice. And that's what you're seeing within your youth at this time. They're beating their chests for more choice. I want more choice. Now, it's not more choice to abandon what has already been there. It's more choice. What else is possible? And in that, you begin to expand the breadth of your view. And when humanity expands the breadth of the view, now it's easy to make a choice that is in resonance. Yes, because it's not just this or nothing.
Right. I was listening to you talk about when you have a fear as a human in 3D, like a fear of a car accident, a fear of any kind of thing that, for me, it's like I worry about my daughter driving. Are those fears coming from a different life? How do you
They
explain that?
are fears and views that sit within the collective human consciousness. And this is what's so interesting about this evolution, because for the past 330,000 years or so, humanity has been in this loop of repetition towards perfection, where all the same experiences are being experienced, which means you've only been able to experience certain permutations of life as a human. One of losing a child in a dramatic, unexpected way is an experience that sits within the human collective blueprint. It's not unique to you. It's been experienced by many, particularly many mothers, because that's one of the experiences that has sat within that collective blueprint. Yes. So it's like coming to a set buffet and you can choose this, or this. And even if you don't consciously choose it, you're aware of it vibrationally, which arises as a subconscious thought because it's sitting in that buffet of human experience. Right. Now, the shift in evolution now is to actually move away from that buffet because you've tasted it all before. You've experienced it all before. You know what it feels like. You already know what it feels like because you have a fear of it.
Yes.
That's because you are a barometer for human consciousness. That experience sits in the collective human consciousness, and you are aware of it. So you already know what it feels like. Even if it hasn't happened for you personally, it's personal to you because it's a human experience.
Right.
So this is not a question of clearing that trauma. That's a question of saying, well, I'm aware of it. Now I choose to evolve my consciousness and to start to create new possibilities and awarenesses that now become available as a new buffet for humanity. And this is where you can become quite radical, dear one. And we are encouraging you to be radical in the choices that you make with your children. Because when you make radical choices with your children, that now becomes something that's available within the collective consciousness, particularly if it's chosen with expansion and fearlessness and boldness.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Yes. When we pass away in this human body, will I understand that everything is all right here now. I just can't, I'm not at the high vibration to connect with my loved ones that have passed on, but they're all right here. Will we remember it as my identity? Is that, because I've heard you talk about identity. My identity as Ashley will just disappear and I'll move in with the oneness of the consciousness. Will you explain how that works when we die?
Yes. So when you move back into the one, you have a wonderful view of all of the components of yourself, all of the aspects of yourself. So let's look at it as a tree. Yes, a great cosmic tree. So you are at the tip of one twig, one branch. Yes. And you are Ashley here. Yes, that is the fruit.
Okay.
And when the fruit falls, you begin to experience yourself now as the thread of consciousness that held that fruit. And that was your identity. That's the sweetness in your life. Yes. That's how you get to taste things and try things and have all of the flavors of human experiences with that identity, the fruit. But when the fruit falls from the tree, now you're aware that you're that twig or that branch, and you begin to move your awareness back into the tree itself. And as that happens and you sink back into the one, you have a great experience of yourself as that twig, of that twig that produced that fruit. But now you also have the simultaneous experience of all the other versions of the consciousness that you are also. The question for humans is, how far back into the tree does your awareness go before you move into another experience? Within the third, fourth dimensional time loop, yes, and we will say it was a loop, it was very difficult to get out of it, or like a time lock, if you will. You could only really go a little way back into the tree, reassess, this is the life that I had, and now let's go back and try to make better fruit. But now that your vibration is expanding, you're actually able to sink back into that oneness experience far more easily, to then be able to express yourself and have an experience of multidimensionality. Now, this is the pearl. The pearl is that that experience in fifth dimensional density for humans is available without a physical death. Or you can sink back and experience all of yourself and then come out again, and then sink back into the one and come out again. And this is when the human is evolved enough to realize that when the fruit drops, it's not a physical death, it's just a death of your current identity. That is what will eventuate as humans having far longer lifespans and moving back towards immortality. Because it's just a version of yourself that drops.
Right.
That's all.
What advice would you give myself, as I would love, and I'm so passionate about raising vibrations and bringing people together at retreats, and sharing people like Rebecca on this show to move people into the fifth dimension. What advice would you have for me to even go more toward that?
Well, it's the same advice we offered you earlier, yes, through this one, which is complete devotion to the expansion of your own consciousness in this human form. So when you are leading your retreats, when you are facilitating conversations, to be so present in your awareness that you are saying, I am doing this from a state of joy because it feels resonant for the continued expansion of my consciousness. And then what you realize is that it's all for you, because you are the representative of source consciousness in this reality. It's a gift to self, it's a gift to source. And in doing so, everything in your reality accelerates and shifts far more quickly. You take your listeners with you, you take your participants with you, because it's really about the evolution of consciousness of self. So if you're doing it for yourself in this act of devotion, you are maximizing your expression here in this earth reality.
Does that help in my, when like Rebecca and her human blueprint of what she was designed to do on this planet in this lifetime? Will people like her go and do something on a different planet? I know she's probably doing that now, but how do you explain, when you raise your consciousness in this 3D body and you keep expanding and you try to you're lifting others with how you just explained what I'm doing. How does that look when you move on? Are you continually raising? Are you continually going higher? Or can you dip back into the lower dimensions and do it again and help bring people back up?
Well, it's only really, as we have said, for an experience of self, an experience of evolution of self. So for this one, there was a conscious choice to experience evolution of self beyond the time lock of third, fourth density identity, yes, because it's your identities. And in doing so, it now becomes about being willing to be here, and this is going to be a challenge, being willing to be here for any other reason than the experience of it. Because when you have a role, I'm here to do this, I'm here for this, that's still falling into the trap of identity. Yes? And so, of course, being in present moment and being able to access your multidimensional self, and all of these things, of course, are occurring simultaneously. One must choose to be powerfully present. And if I am completely present with you, or we are completely present with you, and you are, or you plural are, completely present with us, there is no sense of mission or what I must do. There is the sheer exhilaration of knowing yourself to be source consciousness in this moment.
Is Rebecca part of your the masters? Was she part of that group? And when you came to her bedside and were preparing her for that, was that part of your plan? Was that what you planned in your blueprint before she came to Earth?
Yes. And you would call it a plan because you see it as unfolding in reverse engineering, so we can understand how it was put together. We would say it all occurs simultaneously. Those are moments of resonance. When you feel a resonance, when you feel those goosebumps, when you feel there's something in this, there's something powerful, aha, what you're actually experiencing is multiple points of awareness simultaneously, because they actually happen in the same moment and you experience them in a myriad of ways.
Mm.
It's like a firework, an explosion. It happens in one moment, and each point of that is from the same explosion.
Wow.
When you feel those moments of resonance, there's your body, your physical body is experiencing the simultaneous reality.
Oh, my
Yes.
goodness. Yes,
And that's
yes.
why you love those moments. Oh,
Right.
Jill, something is happening. I don't know what it is. You're experiencing simultaneous reality. Doesn't it feel wonderful?
Yes.
Doesn't it feel like you are alive and you're truly living in that moment?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that how on the other side people that you feel in your soul like you're alive? You can't even express the feelings that you have
Yes.
when you're not in the human body.
Yes, it's exhilarating. Exhilarating. Because you feel that simultaneousness. That is vitality. And we would wish for all humans to feel more vital. And you feel vital when you are in the present moment, because when you are in the present moment, you can begin to experience that simultaneous nature of reality. And in those moments, you are in a state of non-requirement. There is nothing required of you. You are merely existing as source consciousness, and it's wondrous.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and yet humans are plagued by this notion of requirement. What is required of me? What am I required to do? How do I justify my existence here? Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Any
Peace
last?
is the state of non-requirement.
Yes. Any last words of wisdom from you before we bring Rebecca back on?
Well, we would encourage you, dear one, and all who listen to relax deeply into the majesty of being here, because that is the doorway to superconsciousness, not the purpose and the doing and the drive and the goal, but the majesty of the being. That is where the doorway to what you seek exists.
Thank you so much.
Peace be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful questions.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Oh, I could do that all day. Oh, Rebecca, thank you so much. Can we share what's coming up for you or what
What's
how do
coming
people
up for me? I have to
find
get back
you?
into linear time. Let
Yeah,
me
right.
just flip back into that. You can find everything about what we do and a lot of free content and videos and events coming up and seminars and retreats on my website, which is just my name, RebeccaDawson.com. Very simple. And you're in California. I'll be out there, I think, in February for the Conscious Life Expo.
Oh, you will?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Well,
And yeah, come and check out what we have to share with you, because I feel that it's time for people to be able to really dive in and engage.
yes. Oh, for
Thank
sure. Oh,
you.
I'll be there for sure. Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your magic. And I love it so
You're
much. Thank you.
welcome. Thanks for creating the conversation.
Thank you.